Terrapin Farms and has been its manager and owner for some time, and is a valuable asset to our community with her subscription farming.
Thank you.
And you'll find her at the farmer's market. So thank you for coming and giving your time today. She'll talk to you about Beyond the Basics, seed saving, and selection. But before we start, I just wanted to mention that we do have a survey board. It's called the Local Food Systems Board. It's down at the bottom of the stairs. And if you have a comment about what you like or what we can do better, just put it on a sticky note and add it to the board if you don't mind. And also, we have a donation jar in the back of the room if you're so inclined. We depend on donations to be able to offer this, and we want to do it again next year. This is our 3rd year, so thank you for coming and making it such a great success.
Thanks, Diana. Hi, I'm Judy Smith. As Diana said, I have a farm, and I have a great deal of interest, love, and devotion to seeds. Without the seeds, we wouldn't be anywhere. We've been growing seeds since the 1980s. What started my interest in seeds came with a variety of pepper called Carlo pepper. And Carlos were beautiful pepper. They're shaped like this, kind of a gypsy type pepper, and thick-walled, roast and peel really nice. We call them kid strength chilevianos. They're a wonderful pepper. I actually brought seeds in the class I'm doing later. We'll be starting some Carlo peppers. But in the late 80s, I found that they were no longer going to be available. Seeds, you have to sell so many to make it worth growing them. So they weren't really commercially making it. Why did I love Carlo pepper? Earliness, vigor, great producers, great flavor. In our climate, they worked. And that is a huge challenge in our climate, is finding something that works. Where we are, we're up on Farm to Market Road, near the north end of the road. We have a 60-day frost-free season in a good year. And when I found out these peppers were not going to be available, I started saving the seed from them. Now, peppers are what the technical term is, they are promiscuous. They're rampant outcrossers. So they will pick up traits of other peppers near them from pollen that comes to them. So they had been near some sweet peppers that year, and I didn't have any reserve seed on them. So I started reselecting this pepper to get it back to what I wanted. And it took me many years to do it. I got it almost there, and a fellow from Cornell said, I think I know what you want. Let me take it, and I can do 3 seasons in 1 year in our system, in our greenhouses. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Okay. Sorry. I'll go a little louder. And he changed it, and he made it a little thinner walled, a little hotter, and a little smaller. So I started again. This was in the 90s. So I started again. And we now have a gorgeous Carlo pepper. It makes 24, 30 peppers per plant. They're thick-walled, they're delicious, they're gorgeous, they produce well in our climate. But it took a lot of work to get them there. And they're now available through Triple Divide Seed. I'm also part of a cooperative I just want to mention called Triple Divide Seed. You'll see a booth downstairs. Triple Divide Seed is all certified organic, all Montana farmers. And we produce seed that is proper for our climate. It's adaptable for our climate. Who here saves seed? I want to start with that a little bit. Okay, tell me really quick, let's go around, tell me what you save.
Mostly tomatoes and peppers.
Tomatoes and peppers.
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 Squash, tomatoes, peppers.
Okay.
Squash.
Peas, because they tend to save themselves.
If you don't get them picked, that can happen, yeah, yeah.
And then, of course, dill, because it
Does.
goes deep. So it's not that I mean to do it.
Okay. Chris?
All of the above, yeah.
All the
and
above.
Parsnips, they're beautiful.
They are beautiful.
Yeah.
Ornamental.
It's a shade.
Did I see another hand up over here?
Corn and dry beans.
Corn and dry beans. Where do you live?
What's that?
Where do you live?
Eureka.
Okay, you can do corn and dry beans. We have to transplant our sweet corn just to get it to ear stage, no the seed stage where we are. But it works. We transplant it and it does work. Anyway, so seed saving is a big part of our heritage, of our future, and of our current existence. The scarlet gnats, for an example. It's a carrot a lot of people grow, super common. You can buy it from Peaceful Valley Farm Supply in California, you can buy it from Fedco in Maine, you can buy it from a lot of different seed houses. And it could be grown anywhere in the world. So it may not necessarily be adapted to your climate. So we need to be paying attention to where our seeds are actually grown and who's growing them, if possible. If you look at a catalog like Fedco, you're going to see a number in a circle that's going to tell you what type of company is growing it. If it's a small local, if it's a large multinational, if it's a company that also produces GMOs. Triple Divide, you know they're all going to be certified organic and grown in Montana. High Mowing Seeds in Vermont is all organic. Robin Kelson with the Good Seed, they have some very localized, regionalized seed business. So these things are all really important, but the best thing you can do is to save some of your own seed. And I do believe it's the responsibility and the privilege of every farmer to save at least a few varieties of seeds. And in that saving, we're constantly selecting. We're selecting for what does well in our climate. We're selecting for what does well in our soil. And we're always trying to save the best for seed. You don't want to, a good seeds person will have a 50 plant minimum. It's hard to do that at home, that they're selecting their seeds from, because there are attributes to your crop. I mean, you might constantly go, I want the earliest, and so I'm going to save the seeds from the earliest ones. But along the way, you may miss that there's some disease resistant in a plant that's not quite so early, and you may want to keep that genetics also in that plant so that you're maintaining other things than just earliness. There's single trait selection, which would be, i.e. earliness, or I'm working on a pumpkin now that I'm trying to grow for hulless seeds so we can be eating the seeds of them. That's another story. That's another reason we do seeds, because the corporatization of the seed industry has made it so that so many of our seeds are hybridized, because there's no money in an open pollinated seed. They're not putting money into the research for open pollinated seeds. And so we're losing a lot of varieties that way. And the hybridization, when Monsanto bought Seminis, which was the largest vegetable seed producer in the world, we lost on our farm 100+ varieties that we had bought from Seminis that we would no longer buy, not because they were GMO, but because Monsanto was not getting any of our nickels. We work way too hard for every nickel on the farm. So been dehybridizing Monsanto Seminis pumpkin to try and keep the qualities that are in it as a hybrid, but still have it be available to save seeds from. We're looking at a lot of snow out here this year. We might not get in the field in April this year, I don't know. But we'll see. It's different from the way it was 2 years ago, when, I have pictures of my grandkids out riding their bikes in February with a t-shirt on, it's and so we have to realize that our climate might be changing, but it still needs to be adaptable. An open pollinated seed stock is going to create a lot more adaptability, because it's got a lot more genetics to draw from than a hybrid does. We do grow hybrids. We grow hybrids because there are some varieties that just haven't had enough work done on the OPs, and we can't get the quality out of them yet. But we're constantly working out that with seed trials and things like that. Each of us is our own seed bank. In certain countries that I've been to, there'll be a raised bed, small scale farming, raised beds, and one plant sticking out the side. Well, that one's so hardy that that's the one they're going to save the seed from. That's the one that's going to make your stock seed. Are you guys familiar with the term stock seed? Okay, some of you are, some of you aren't. Stock seed is, it's your selected seed that you use to grow your seed from. It's your generation that's going to be, I'm sorry?
Next generation.
Yeah. So if you're a grain grower and you're out on your tractor and you're going to be looking at your field of wheat and you're going to go, that area over there, the kernels are bigger, they're taller, the stalks are stronger. You're selecting. You're going to say, I'm going to harvest that area. That's hard to do as a grain grower, but a good grain grower does that, because usually it's all in the combine and all in the bin. But grain is a seed. Lentils are a seed. Peas, as you said, are a seed. The part we eat is the seed on a lot of these crops. Saving seed is kind of challenging because we have rain in the fall here, and that's when we want it to be dry, to be saving our seed, because that's when we're going to be processing it. So one of the things you need to do is have a backup plan, and then probably another and another backup plan in case those ones don't work. But you've got a beautiful crop of lettuce seed. It's just about ready to go, and wham, the rains are coming in. You can build a tent over it, throw something lightweight over it, harvest it and windrow it and cover it, or what we wind up doing, harvest it, take it in a shed, turning the fans on, and drying it that way. Our short climate, again, makes it a challenge because our maturities are frequently longer than what we have to offer. So if you need to, you whack the plant, you windrow it or bring it inside on the plant so it can keep sucking that energy into the seed and have it keep maturing the seed into a viable seed. And I'm open to questions all along the way. You don't have to save them for the end. If you have a question, throw your hand up. So one thing we have learned is if you're producing seed in our climate, you need to transplant pretty much everything. You're like, you know what? I grew lettuce, and I had lettuce, started it from seed in the garden, and I had it going all over in the garden the next year, so I must be able to grow lettuce seed. Well, you can, but you can't count on it that way. So we always start our things like that inside, in plugs, transplant them out, and then they stand a much better chance of making it to maturity. Obviously, our tropical plants, our peppers, our tomatoes, and things like that, you're going to be starting those inside, and you're going to be bringing those, again, to maturity inside. If you're doing squash, are you after ripening your squash seed?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Otherwise, it is trash. It doesn't do anything. Just
Right. You harvest it, you bring it in, you make sure you have a good bit of stem on it, and you let it after ripen for a good 6 weeks. Sometimes 2 plus.
We live in Kalispell, so it's a little harder because we're up a little higher than the valley.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Yeah.
everything is look at it, touch it, feel it. Okay, it should be there.
It should be there. It should be there. When you're ordering seed from a catalog and they're like back ordered, coming in on February or March or whatever, it's because a lot of these crops aren't really ready in that short a season that they can get them to the seed house by November and have them out the door by December. Because if you're after marketing a squash and then you're processing it, then, or after ripening a squash and then processing it, it's going to take that much longer to get viable. Let's touch on squash for a minute, and we can touch on a few things. If you have particular things you want to hear more about, please ask. But squash are, again, promiscuous within their own family. So there's 5 major families of squash. And if you have more than one anywhere within half a mile of squash, then you're going to get cross-pollination. It can be a good thing. When you cross a spaghetti squash and a zucchini, you get a spaghetti squash that lasts forever. It'll keep in your house for 3 years. I can't tell you the flash has the best quality.
But it does, because it's so hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My wife, we didn't know that when we first started. We've only got it's probably a 50 by 100 garden, 2 different varieties of squash. The next thing we knew, the next year we planted, out of the seeds, things weren't as they were supposed to be.
We have some interesting aberrations still in the cellar, let's put it that way.
But we were able to keep them in the garage on a pallet for 4 months, and never even worried about it being soft or moldy.
Right.
Or anything.
Yeah, I think I have a couple that are more than 1 year old. But, and it, it can't be helped. You have to think about what your neighbors are growing too. In the Northwest, which is our biggest seed growing region in this country, in the Olympic Peninsula, Willamette Valley, that area, they do something called pinning. And the county arranges a map and seed growers have to put pins in for who's growing what seed where to prevent cross-pollination. Beets, chard, spinach everlasting, they'll all cross. So if your neighbor's growing beets and you're growing chard, boom, then you've got, you know, who knows what you've got. They're way too closely related to be able to successfully save seeds. What we do, because those are biennials, we do alternate years between, we're doing a yellow chard and a spinach everlasting, and 1 year we'll do the chard while the everlasting is doing its first year growth and it's not flowering. And the other thing is, as a home gardener, you might just want to see what happens. You might be like, that's okay, I don't mind if I have a beet on the bottom and chard at the top of the plant, you know? But biennials, again, in our climate are a challenge because you have two choices with the biennial. You leave it in the ground and hope the weather is cooperative over the winter, that you get enough snow so that you're protecting that plant. We have a lot of things right now in the ground that we'll find out come spring if they made it or not, so you're taking a risk. Or you can lift it and replant it. And that lifting and replanting is how you would do root crops. And because that way you get to be doing your selection of radishes. Radishes are an annual, but you can lift them and put them back in the same year to select them if you want to do it that way. Same thing, beets, carrots, biennial crops. You lift them, you pick out the best ones, and then you look again a month later in the cellar and you taste them again, and then you do it in the spring to see which really survives well, and those are the roots you're going to put back in the ground to produce seed for the coming year. And again, the ones that are doing the best are the ones that are doing the best in our microclimate. There is going to be a discussion at some point today, I'm not sure when, I think at 2:15, about a community seed bank, because you can only do, if you're truly doing a pepper that you don't have an isolation chamber for, and isolation chambers do work, and you can build your own isolation chambers. They're really kind of not economically viable as far as production goes, but you can build your own simple ones even with a very fine remay and wooden frames but then you have to be able to open them on alternate days so your insects can get in and pollinize, or have your own little crop of insects in there that you introduce. And that's where it gets expensive and complicated if you're buying bees or flies or something to have in there. And if you put bees in one of those things, you do not get really happy bees, and they tend to be a little aggressive when you open it up to reach in there. So you have to be very wary of that. And flies, you have to have dead meat in there for flies to live while they're doing their pollinizing, yes.
So do you hold the vegetables till spring? You pick out the ones you want after you...
With root crops,
yeah.
You can do that. We do it with kohlrabi, which is not a root crop. You can do it, but like with celeriac, beets, and that kind of stuff, you keep them in a root cellar. You can overwinter them in the ground, but frequently, our climate is a challenge there, and we also have this little issue with rodentia. They tend to like to get in there, and what they're going to do is eat the tops, because that's what they can get at. They're going to eat the tops of your beets and the tops of your carrots, and then there's not going to be anything to sprout from. Onions, shallots, it's the same. You reset your regular old onion or shallot bulbs to be able to grow them for seed the second year. You might see your onion go into seed out there in its first year, and that can happen if it's gone in late, if it's been stressed at some point. You think, oh great, I'll get onion seeds this year from these ones that I just seeded this year. You don't want to do that. That's not a trait you want. You don't want that trait of going to bolt when it's under stress. You want to eliminate that trait. So don't resist the temptation to let a biennial produce seeds in its first year and use those seeds, because you will not have a crop you want. Because like with an onion, if it's going to seed, it's not really making a bulb. It's got that hard onion straw thing, and that's not our desired characteristic. So you want to not give in to that kind of thing. But when you're talking about something like a beet or a carrot, and if you have limited storage space, this gets a little tricky. You can cut the bottom third off of it, and it'll still regrow for a seed top on beets and carrots. Onions, you can cut the top third off. and you've got the roots and it sends up its spike. I'm jumping around a little bit here, just if you haven't noticed. But all these things are just little tricks that make things easier to do in our challenging climate. So if you want to grow lettuce seed, or if you want to grow cabbage seed, you need a baseball bat. Because you've got this big, beautiful head of lettuce, a romaine lettuce, and it's nice and stiff and upright, and then it's got its core inside that's kind of being tightly curved in, and that seed stalk is in the center, and it wants to be able to break through that core. So the easiest way to help it is to smack it, gently but firmly, and then your seed core is good. I can never do it. It's really hard to do, but you can. No, I can do it. And then the seed core can get up. You don't want to do it too hard because you don't want to smash your seed core that's trying to erupt. Same thing with cabbages. Anybody ever early spring cabbage that later in the season all of a sudden you see it sending up a seed stalk, and it's been working. And first is the point. You have your nice round golden acre, summer July cabbage, and you'll see it start to get pointed, and then it'll start to get bitter. And as it gets bitter, it's putting all its energy into its seed head, and it's trying to get those seeds to get all of the bricks, all the sweetness, all the calories to kind of go into developing the seed. Let's see. Tomatoes. I want to touch on tomatoes a little bit. There's the jury is out, I guess you could say, on tomatoes still. Tomatoes tend to not cross as much as some people think they do. So you can have tomatoes close to each other and still save seed from them. There are two things to look for in doing that. One is the potato leaf varieties, which do well here because a lot of them are really cold hardy varieties. Those varieties are going to be a little bit more have a little more tendency to cross. And the varieties where the stigma is protruding more, if it's in the flower more, then the pollen can't get to it from other plants so well. It's self-pollinizing when you're shaking it. And if it's sticking out more, then the other pollen can get to it. Now, tomatoes set fruit in about 80 degrees. It's an optimum temperature for fruit set. If it gets much hotter than that, if it gets above 85 or 90, they're going to drop blossom. And so you're not going to get fruit from so like we had a super warm summer this last summer. And you're like, well, great, we're going to have wonderful tomatoes. It's hot out, If you have them in any kind of an enclosure, which a lot of us do because we don't normally get those warm temperatures, so we have them in an enclosure, they drop blossom for that first set. And then you got a later set, which actually is not as wonderful because you don't have the early tomatoes and you don't get as many at the end of the season. But the other thing is if they're too cold when they're setting their first fruit, those first fruits won't have seeds when it's really cold. So you might want to wait for your second, if you get into it and you go, why are these tomatoes seedless? What a pain in the butt, I'm just going to eat them, forget the seed. Don't give up. If your first ones are seedless, hold on for your next crop and then look for seed in that. And they're likely to be more seed and more viable seed in your second crop if they set when it's really cold. Because the pollination can happen, but I don't know, the science parts, I like the soil part.
Do you have any specific tomatoes that you're finding are working well in this environment?
Yes.
I mean, they grow pretty well, but the temperatures are...
We like adaptability.
Too difficult here.
What we do for seed, we do a Black Russian, which I think is the tops for flavor. And it also is very adaptable to both indoor and outdoor growing, and is its drawback is a propensity to get little facing cracks in it, but I don't mind it because, I have people that have never eaten tomatoes and they think Black Russian are fabulous, because they're very good.
Taste, yes.
Yes.
It's just, like, so we have a difficulty growing.
They do well here, though.
Okay.
even with taste. They're a seed originally out of British Columbia, as far as I know, from where I got it from. So it's from a fairly cool climate, maritime, but fairly cool. There's another variety called Silvery Fir. Silvery Fir, Leslie Klein grows for Triple Divide Seeds. She grows that seed down in Moise. We threw it out there this year as a marker. And I do most of my tomatoes inside. Because of our climate, they're either in a hoop house, a high tunnel, or something like that. But we were doing some seed trials of cucumbers. And so I needed something between each cucumber plant to mark where it changed from one variety to the next. And we threw in a half a dozen Silvery Firs in between each cucumber variety and ignored them. They were in IRT, black plastic, which we have to do our cucumbers in just to get a cucumber. And they just did fabulous. Outside, not undercover, just the IRT and drip irrigation. And
But that was last summer, right?
that was last summer.
Right.
The-
For
this
everything
pa-
that was better
But they
outside
went in
than
late.
greenhouse.
They went in late, too. And yes, but I think Silvery Fir is definitely, it shows great promise for our climate. And then the Silvery Fir, I really liked them.
I like
Yeah,
them.
okay.
Good
Yeah,
as a
they're
eating
good, nice
tomato,
size,
or-
yes, nice size. And I think, tomatoes in particular, you can grow them one year and hate them, and you can grow them the next year and love them because they're so sensitive to climate, fertility, things like that. There's quite a variation. So I never give up on a tomato in less than 3 years if I think it has potential, because they'll have different attributes and different years that they do well with.
Can you talk a little bit about determinant and indeterminate?
In tomatoes?
Yeah.
Sure. Determinants are predetermined. They're a bush plant. They're not going to get much bigger than this. They're good for us in a short climate. I really like them in a short climate because you get all your production in a more concentrated time set. An indeterminate will just grow and grow and grow. Literally, it'll keep on going. In the tropics, they're perennial. And they're wonderful if we have a long, hot season. You get more from an indeterminate. If we have a short, cooler season, you get more from a determinate. We grow both. I tend to prefer the determinants, particularly also for indoor growing, depending upon what your indoor growing space is, because it's limited on to how high they can get. But yeah, that's the basics on that. Same thing with squash. You have bush and vining types predetermined. The cold hardy ones tend to be the bush ones. The more longer season ones tend to be the vining ones.
Is your Silvery Fir a determinant?
Yes, very determinate. It would do well in a pot. And that's another way you can work isolation is by doing things in pots and having them here and there. But one of the other challenges for our environment here is, and I don't mean to offend anybody here, I hope I don't, but if I do, that's okay, because canola. Canola is a huge challenge because of its popularity. Its GMO qualities make it a very dominant genealogy, and they travel very far, and they cross with a lot of our brassica plants, with kales primarily, not all the kales, but some of the kales. So when you're saving seed, you have to look at if there's a canola field near you or not if you're doing a brassica seed. And
Across the road doesn't work.
right across the road does not work. The other problems that we see with that, and this is one that we learned this year, we went out to the broccoli, and we do a lot of broccoli, and not for seed, but we do a lot of broccoli, and they were covered in a weevil. Mm-hmm. And I sent that weevil to Bozeman, and they're like, we've never seen it. No. And it's called a cabbage seed pod weevil. All of the research comes out of Saskatchewan. But it becomes broccoli we eat at the just before pod stage. We like to let our broccoli stay on until it's almost blooming, because that's when it has the most flavor and the most nutrients. So we don't like the tight, they ship well heads. You'll never see that at our produce stand. But these weevils were destroying the seed crops. Yeah, and they came in on what's called trash. Canola that's been allowed to, not been tilled down and been allowed to produce the second year is called trash canola. And because it's GMO, the Roundup doesn't work on it, and it's too much work to physically get out there with the tractor and work it in. So, that's where it becomes a problem, is in second year canola seed. And the day they caught the canola seed, about 1.5 miles from us, I got all the weevils. And they stayed a week, 10 days, and then they left.
And then they left?
And then they left.
Well, we have to destroy most of the stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that why we have so many of the cabbage moths?
No. Well, yes, they're related to the weevils. But, I mean, if you were a moth and you were just flitting around the world and you saw this huge yellow field of flowers that was like your choice, you'd be like, hey, I like the flathead. And yes, we have a lot of that. And flea beetles. And the flea beetles also come in on the canola.
What is that little bug that attaches itself to like a kale?
What's it look like?
Oh, it's little. They're so tiny you can't even tell it's a bug.
Black.
Yeah.
And if you try and go pinch it, it jumps.
I mean, it just became infested with them.
When? In the fall or in the spring?
I don't know. It happened like 2 years ago to me.
Spring bugs are probably flea beetles. They diminish more as the season goes on. In the fall, sometimes the aphids move into the kale.
What is good for aphids?
That's another, yeah, your fingers, BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, ladybugs, soap,
Does diatomaceous earth work?
nope.
Constant.
Diatomaceous earth doesn't work on, no. Diatomaceous earth works with bugs that have to crawl across the soil, and the aphids can fly in. If they have to crawl across the soil, they ooze to death over diatomaceous earth. You know, so like they're more for slugs, which we don't have a lot of until last year, but yeah. So cucurbita. We talked about cucurbita crossing a little bit. Cucurbita being squashes, cucumbers, melons, and things like that. I do believe that there are certain melons that are actually cucumbers and certain cucumbers that are actually melons out there that are there's some Japanese ones that look very much like a cross to me, and they act very much like a cross to me, and I think it's possible.
But those aren't necessarily bad because they're naturally cross-pollinated.
Yes, well, they can be, or they can be hybrids.
Okay.
They could be, it depends what it is. I'm not,
Okay.
you know, if,
I'm referring to more like where you have two squashes that are close, and they're just naturally.
yes, but they're not bad and evil, but they're not necessarily good in that you're going to get the traits you want.
Right.
You know, a really hard-skinned zucchini is probably not our favorite thing, and you'll see lots of those second year when they cross, you know. So you want to try and avoid it if possible, and you need to know what family your squash is in to know how to do that. Suzanne Ashworth has a book called Seed to Seed, and I did not bring that one. It's an old book. It's been reprinted many times. Actually, I think it disappeared in the bunkhouse this year, but we're not going to go there right now, Madeline. Seed to Seed has a beautiful chart about the different varieties, which ones are which families, so you know which one they cost. Sometimes when you buy your seed, it'll have the Latin name on it, so that'll help you. And also, by looking at the seeds, the 5 different families of squashes have 5 very distinct seeds. Some are thicker, some are furry around the edge, some have more of an elongated point. The seeds are very different, and the ones with similar seeds are going to be most likely to cross.
So are you saying that you have to be careful, like growing squash, cucumbers in the same vicinity? I mean, do they cross with one another?
They shouldn't. Absolutely shouldn't.
They shouldn't, but they might.
You can make it happen.
Aren't
Yeah.
you supposed to change the position on where your plants are each season?
Oh, yeah. But that's got nothing to do with seed. That's just about good soil health and
Okay.
and good gardening and good farming. Yeah. Yeah. But yes, you should do that.
Maybe cucumbers and melons would be more likely.
There's a melon called a sun jewel, which is a hybrid, which is a Japanese melon that I'm pretty darn sure that has some cucumber parentage in there.
They're both kind of watery.
What's that?
They're both kind of watery.
They're both kind of watery, but just looking at the seeds and the shape and everything else and the coloring, I think there's some definite interesting parentage, and I've been playing with those a lot. And seeds are fun. Seeds are fun. Seeds are frustrating because it's slow. It's not instant gratification. It takes years and years and years to get where you want with seeds sometimes, you know. And or even, I'm not trying to discourage you, but that's when you're doing breeding work. But when you're just doing some selection or trying to save your own seeds, I think they're way fun.
So you must keep copious notes then. I'm like, how do you remember? This one was the early one that was like had this, and this one.
We're supposed to keep copious notes. When we do a formal seed trial, like for Organic Seed Alliance or something, we have forms that we fill out, and those are done as blind trials. You have a number on them, you don't know what it is. We ate enough cucumbers at lunch this year just to get really sick, and it was, by the time you'd eaten 10, every day we tasted 10 of them, it seemed like, or did we try and do it every other day after a while, to come up with words to describe the differences between 10 different cucumber varieties. So don't overextend yourself. I say 5 is a good number. We happen to do, what did we do, Middle Eastern and American slicers this year, the same year. I wouldn't do that again. I would do one of them, but not both of them in the same year. But yes, you need good notes both on production, quality, taste, all that kind of stuff if you want to be doing that. And we keep a very good notebook of our seed planting, when plants go out, how many go out, where they go. We have a map that's pretty detailed for the field, and then we have a whole notebook for stuff that gets started inside and for inventory of seeds. And in that notebook, it might say, do more, do less, do earlier, do later. Doesn't, like with broccoli, we have maybe 12 varieties of broccoli, and and most of them are hybrids. But we do 12 varieties of broccoli pretty much because some do great in heat, and some take heat terrible and they turn to mush. They turn brown and yellow and turn to mush on top. Some have a more domed head for a wet year. The water can run off, or a flatter head where the water's going to sit on it. They're so sensitive to the environmental aspects that you're giving them. But did you have a question?
Since you mentioned cucumbers, I was just curious what you recommended here for a good hardy cucumber.
Varietals. Hardy and cucumbers don't always go in the same sentence.
Did you say varietals?
Yeah, what varieties? She's asking what varietals. I look for early, to be honest, for a commercial standpoint. There was one called Jazzer, I'm trying to remember. I think we did Ministro this year as a very early one. And then for our main crop, we do our standards like Market More. We happen to really like Boothby's Blonde. It's like, Boothby's Blonde is similar to a lemon, but it's earlier.
What was it?
Boothby's Blonde. It's like, we love the Middle Easterns. Middle Easterns are thin-skinned, juicy, sweet, crisp, delicious. They don't hold as well once you harvest, but you don't care because you're not buying them. You're picking them because you're growing them, and that means you can pick them every day, so it doesn't matter how well it keeps in the refrigerator. So for Middle Eastern, we do one called Middle Eastern Prolific, and we do the seed for that one in a high tunnel, so it's isolated for our main crop. So we have our main crop of cucumbers out in the field, and then the ones we're doing for seed are in a high tunnel or a hoop house to be isolated. So we have one variety in one hoop house, and then we have another variety in the high tunnel, and we do the Middle Eastern Prolific for seed in the high tunnel, but then we also do it outside for food. And we do the seed for that for Triple Divide again, Triple Divide seeds.
What was the cucumber that you mentioned after early?
Market More
Yeah.
is your standard American slicer, just a standard one. And there's Market More's 66, 70, 76, 80. I think those numbers are probably from the years they were developed. But we do a 76. It tends to be the best year.
Are those good for like canning?
No,
No.
that's a pickling cuke. Whole nother ballpark again.
Good to know.
Yeah,
Can I ask kind of a beginner's question?
yeah,
Okay, you've got your seed.
yeah.
Your plant has gone to seed. You've taken the seeds. How do you dry them, store them? What is the next step?
It depends. There's 2 genres of seed, and I do have some seed with me, obviously. I like my hands-on stuff. But there's wet seed and dry seed. A wet seed would be your cucumbers, your tomatoes, your tomatillos, your squashes, anything where the seed is inside the fruit, and you're going to be harvesting a wet fruit. There are certain people that can take them to a dry stage, but that's a whole other story. We won't take them to dry stage here. A wet seeded variety, tomatoes you can do in the blender if you're very careful about it. Chop them up, and you ferment tomatoes. Do you ferment your tomato seeds? Okay. Who else does tomatoes? Ferment them?
Yeah, just put it in a jar of water.
Oh yeah, we have buckets all over the house. All over the house. It smells to high heaven, and I love it.
Making some tomato wine or something.
Well, I am who I am, and so small tomatoes we would put in the blender, a cherry tomato. A bigger tomato, you cut along the equator. You squeeze out the gel with the seeds in them, and then you have these 2 tomato halves that go in a baggie in the freezer for later. See, and that's how I roll. And I do tomato seeds on a couple contracts, and we have a lot of tomatoes in the freezer. And then you,
Like that?
I'm sorry?
You can just freeze them like you don't have to cook them or?
Nope. And then I bring them out and cook them after. You know, make soup or, you know, make my hot
Then
sauce.
when you're taking the gel and the seeds, and you've got them in buckets.
So you've got it in a bucket, and twice a day you're beating them up a little bit. You can use a whip on them, you can use something to just keep that gel broken up. Now the reason you ferment tomato seeds is because they have a coating on them that slows down and or prevents their germination. And they will ferment naturally. If a tomato seed drops outside, those seeds are going to be on the ground, and there's going to be all kinds of good microbes in the ground. They're going to be eating away and actually working at them. But if you take them and just dry them, that's not a natural stage for them. So we ferment them first, so we have a good set of film across the top of them. You know, mold film. and then we decant them. The good seeds will sink to the bottom, and the non-viable seeds will float with all the grossness. And you keep adding water and pouring it off, adding water and pouring it off, and then all you will have is seeds in the bottom of your pitcher, or if you're doing just a few of them, it could be even in a measuring cup with a little spout at it or something. And then you drain your seeds and dry your seeds. You don't want to dry them with heat too hot. There's a magic number in seeds, and this is not necessarily about savings, this is for keeping your seeds once you've saved them, and that number is 100. You want your combination of your humidity and your temperature in your seed storage area to be under 100. So if you've got a 60-degree basement room and 40% humidity, you're borderline. As much as you can get under that 100, the better off you are. That's kind of the magic number on that one.
So not
So-
in a cold place.
It can be cold.
Oh,
Gets under
as
100.
long as it's.
Yeah. I'm going to talk more about this in seed starting, but some like to be frozen. But yeah, you want to keep them cold, you want to keep them dry, and you want to keep them out of the light, dark. You think about everything you need to start a plant, you take it away. The moisture, the heat, the light, get rid of all that, and your seeds are going to last a lot longer. That's for sure. Certain seeds are more prone to lose their germination, and certain seeds actually have a lower germination when you first harvest them. When they're first dried, you're not going to get germination out of them until they go through a dormancy period, and then they can come out of that dormancy. And that's so specific that we're not really going to go there, but don't be discouraged. Sometimes it takes a dormancy or a forced dormancy or vernalization or scarification to make it happen. Yeah, so other wet-seeded techniques like peppers, again, I do the same thing. I contract peppers, but I want that flesh in my freezer. So we get in the kitchen with our knives and our scoops, and we take the seeds out. And those you can just wash and dry. But again, they're not quite so true when you do a flotation on those. We talk about tomatillo seed or eggplant seed or tomato seed in an aqueous solution. You can do that with the peppers, but I wouldn't tell you the ones that float off the top. Don't throw them out. There might still be some pretty good ones in there with the floaters and those. A dry seed, once it's dried, and we're going to play with a little in a few minutes. But once it's dried, you know, if you can harvest them in the field dry, just go whack, you know, go out there with your harvest bucket, bend your seed head over and shake it. We do a lot of that. And again, like if you're doing a carrot seed, some of them will be ready before others will be ready. So you might be out there 5 times harvesting your carrot seed. And if earliness is your goal, you're going to want to do the bulk of the seed you save from the first shake, if that's your goal. If your goal is disease resistance, you want to look for the most resistant ones. There's a really fabulous farmer by the name of Frank Morton who has wild garden seeds in Philomath over in Oregon. And he has what he calls Hell's Half Acre. And when he's working on a new variety, he's got this spot where there's no air circulation, the trees are there, it's damp, and it's got every fungus and every disease you can imagine. So if he's working on a new variety, he'll throw them out there. And he'll see which ones survive that. And those are the ones that he wants to be commercializing. You know, so, and he's kind of a wild guy anyway, so that's his style. But yeah, actually I've got some Aurora Auroch seeds at my booth down there that are out of his Aurora Auroch, because he just throws all kinds of things together and comes up with these beautiful mixes. But we've been growing the seed from him. So dry plants, so once you, if you're a home gardener, you're not totally worried about having a little debris in your seed. The reason you want the debris out is because debris can hold moisture and it can cause molds and rotting in there. I'm going to throw one other thought out there too that I hadn't mentioned yet, and that's air circulation. Super important for everything you're doing and everywhere you're going, whether it's in your growing area. If you're growing inside, you need fans because you need air circulation. If you're storing seeds, you need air circulation. We run fans in our greenhouse year-round even with nothing growing in it. We run fans in our root cellar year-round even when there's nothing stored in it, because air circulation helps plants and environments stay healthier and keeps molds down. I just wanted to throw that out there because it's super important to have everywhere along the line. A cheap fan, and don't ever unplug it once you've turned it on, because they don't come back on again after a few years. Just leave it. If it's working, let it go. And when you water them, they don't grow. So if you got a fan in the greenhouse, try not to water it. So it doesn't all of a sudden go from a desk fan to a floor fan or anything like that. But did that kind of answer your question a little bit? Okay. Okay. So from the dry seed, then you're going to screen it. And so we can, if anybody wants to play with this, I'm really excited about this. This is a gift to our co-op this year. This is actually I have a set of these screens. They're from Bench Industries in Great Falls, Montana. And it was donated to the Montana Organic Association conference for our fundraiser and purchased for us by this fabulous wheat breeder who donated it to Triple Divide. So there's 2 things that screens do. There's a scalping screen, which is bigger holes, which takes your big debris off the top. And then there's a dirt screen that lets the dirt through and keeps the seed on the screen. Now, I'm not sure if I have quite the right screens for this. This box is a double box, and so we have a scalping screen on the top, which is a slightly larger hole, and then we slide in. It's kind of like the magician's thing, you know, where I haven't used it yet too, see. So I'm really excited about this because I just got it in December and I haven't used it yet. And I thought, I'm going to bring this because it's beautiful and it's fun. So every plant needs a story. So does anybody know what these are?
Yeah, black-eyed Susans, or Rebecca, or echinacea.
We're getting closer. This is bee balm.
Oh, we can smell it now.
Bee balm. And I'm going to share with you bee balm's story because I love bee balm's story. Bee balm is obviously a bee attractant. The monarchs love it. It's great to have around your beneficials. It's a super hardy perennial. It's used, it's the other ingredient other than tea leaves in Earl Grey tea. It's bergamot, monarda. Oswego tea is another name. Oswego tea. The Oswego Indians during the Boston Tea Party showed this plant to the colonists. So when they dumped the English tea in the harbor, they made their tea out of this. So we call it revolutionary tea. But it's got a lot of names and it's got a fun story. So its seeds are quite small. And you're welcome to come up if you want to see how this plays out. So what I would do is I would take my bloom, and you can rub it on your screen, or you can just do this with it, so that a little bit of it. Here, somebody want to rub it? Bust up a few of them on here, and let's see what we can come up with. See, and you can see it's actually dropping seed as we go.
Yeah, it's pulling through some of it, actually.
It should. But this box has, it's sitting on this.
Yeah, it's tiny, actually.
They're a very
Yeah.
small seed, and I'm not, like I said, I
Like
just
a
grabbed
poppy
less.
seed.
Yeah, even smaller. So then what you would do with this is you would shake it a little bit. It's kind of like magic, right?
Yeah.
Rub them a little bit, yeah. And then take this one off. And theoretically, there would,
Chaff.
yeah, theoretically, if I had a smaller screen here, this seed would all be in here, would be trapped in here. And the dirt and the debris should be in this bottom one. But a lot of this is our seeds, so we need, it is. So we need a smaller screen in our bottom screen to really make it
For a
work.
different plant.
Oh yeah, but I have 60 different size screens I just grabbed. And screens come slotted because a lot of our seeds aren't round. A lot of our seeds are long and thin, a marigold seed or something like that. They come triangular. I have triangular ones. Buckwheat seed is kind of like a pyramid.
Selection.
I have 60 screens for this box. And it's a
So you and
just,
I can't really afford probably 60 screens for one box.
no, but what you
for
can
our
do,
garden.
you can do is, and screens have numbers on them.
But can't you just take these and crunch them up and
You
then,
can.
and then just put them in a bag and then next year
Yes, as a home gardener, you can.
kind of cast them?
Or the other thing you do is you put them in front of a fan. And your seeds have, it's in the same way that a wet seeded variety would be at the bottom, the seeds would be at the bottom of your water container or liquid container. In a fan, when we're fanning our seeds, we usually have square containers, so they're right up next to each other, so there's no space between them. We set up 2 box fans, one behind each other, and that way you don't get any bursts. It kind of is a more even flow. And the first, like we'll use a big Tupperware container type thing, you know, what do you call those, Rubbermaid tubs? The first tub will have your best seed. The lighter seeds will go into your next tub, and the debris will go into the third. Theoretically, seeds are more dense, but sometimes you'll get spinach everlasting, which is a chard actually type thing. Those kind of things, you find that some of your sticks have the same density of your seeds. If you think about a chard or a beet seed, they're actually pretty light, and they're such weird shapes and sizes. There's not a lot of consistency, so those are challenging to clean.
So you're saying that you had like Tupperware containers, 3 in a row.
So here's my 2 fans right here,
Surface?
right? And I pour the seeds in front of the fan. The fan blows the debris away and drops the seeds into the containers right in front of the fan. And you
The best seeds in the first one, and the middle one's going to be kind of a mix, and the third one's compost. Is that right?
pretty much. Sometimes you'll run them twice, you know, because sometimes you'll realize you need your fan to be slowed down or speed it up, or, you know, it takes some real just playing around. And one of the things that I have learned in growing seed is, I can say this, don't be Jewish. Plan on losing some seed. It's just not, you can't save them all. You want them clean, you want them to be, you don't want it, you just are never going to save every seed. It just doesn't work that way. If you're doing it for your home use and you're not just concerned about having, I mean, if I'm selling seeds, I have to make sure all my debris is out. They have to be clean. You know, onion is an interesting one, the allium family, in that it's an odd-shaped seed. It's kind of that triangular-shaped seed like the buckwheat. It's dry harvested, and again, it's one of those we go to a few times. It's dry, she's telling me I have 5 minutes, it's okay. It's dry harvested, but we float it. When it's all done drying, it's super hard to get all the debris out of onion seed. If you ever buy a packet of onion seed, you'll see there's debris in there if you pay. Most people don't care, but if you look, you'll notice there might be some in there. But we float it, and the debris and the bad seeds float off, and your viable seeds sink, theoretically. Everything is theory, and then making the reality is a whole nother story. So
Good thing about that is I take it out, I plant the whole thing, what
Yeah.
comes up, comes up.
Yeah,
Right, right.
and then I think there's not a lot of commercial growers out here right now. But if there are, anybody who's interested in commercially growing organic seed, Triple Divide's always looking for growers. Just throwing that out there. Any questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, good job.
Thanks.
Judy. It's full of